It's that time of the week. We're back with another fantasy football must-sit list here for week 3 action. This time around, we're talking running backs here and 5 players that I have on my bust radar for week 3 games. Of course, if you're new around here, I say this every episode, drop down and smash that subscribe button, turn the bell on so you're never late for a new video and can pop in here very quickly and get your questions and thoughts, answered and heard here as we approach this week's fantasy games. I'm not going to waste too much time before jumping into today's episode, so let's dive into the first player. All right, quickly, as always, I'm going to recap last week. So we went 3 of 5 in the must-sit list. Our 2 misses last week were Jeff Wilson Jr., who had 18 rushing attempts, over 100 yards from scrimmage. No touchdown, though, so it wasn't the highest ceiling game in the world. And then Breece Hall, who had himself a mere 8 touches, but happened to score a touchdown with one of those and be incredibly efficient on his 7 rushing attempts from that game. So he scored 12 fantasy points. Jeff Wilson was like somewhere around 10.5 and half PPR scoring. So that's how things baked out last week. 60% accuracy again, 3 of 5 picks. So for this week, on the bust radar, starting out here, we've got Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the LA Chargers here. The Jags are 7-point dogs against LA. And if we're being honest, a guy who I loved in the draft process, Etienne, is off to quite the rough start this year. He had the most missing fantasy points of any player in week 1. However, we're now moving on from that. We had a week 2 contest that there is some context I'm going to put behind it, but I am still a bit nervous because it's been 2 weeks and we haven't seen the production show up here. So I'll tell you why he could miss in this game, why he could also hit. The reason he could miss is that after a Indianapolis blowout here, which I should rephrase that, a game in which the Jags blew out Indianapolis in week 2, Travis Etienne saw his snap count percentage drop from over 50% in week 1 to 37%. Now, why is that the case? Again, adding context behind the analysis here. The fact of the matter is that if you're up big, you can run out the contest late. So if Jacksonville's front running in this contest, they don't have the need for the receiving back nearly as much. Therefore, Travis Etienne goes to the bench. Insert James Robinson. He's having more of a involved approach in terms of their offensive attack down the stretch of the last quarter and a half of that game or whatever point in the contest they went up that 24-point margin there. Additionally here, you've also got a player who has kind of missed on some plays. He's had some bad drops, so I'm not going to totally give him a pass here. Some of the missing fantasy points are his fault, but he was very efficient at 11 yards per catch in that matchup this past week against the Colts, 33 total yards receiving. So I did want to toss out that game script context, though, of why that snap share is potentially dropping down to 37% here and looking like a pretty shaky number on paper. The other thing I want to note, though, is 3.5 targets per game is his average right now. It is just 2 games of a sample size, but 7 total on the season at 3.5 targets per game does put him below the average of Doug Peterson's historical lead running backs for, just since he's been an offensive coordinator or head coach in the league. His lead back has seen over 4 opportunities in the passing game per contest. So that's unfortunate. You could make the argument, hey, James Robinson's still the lead back for this team. Sure, fine, whatever. But the hope here was that Travis Etienne would get more than 4 opportunities per game in the passing offense, and that hasn't been the case. So I'm not totally bailing or panicking on Etienne here. It is just things that haven't necessarily bounced his way. It is clear that J-Rob is the preferred goal line back for the team at this current point in time, and I'll be honest, I really don't know if I see that changing. So the one reason and possibility for Travis Etienne totally crushing this week and maybe being worth a lineup play, and I will say, if you're in a deeper PPR, a full PPR format, he might be worth a flex nod here if you don't have too many strong wide receiver options, but they are playing the Chargers. As I said, 7-point underdogs, the complete opposite expectation of what last week was. And for a majority of reasons, if you expected the Colts to win last week, you could have made the same argument heading into the game. But if the Chargers blow out the Jags here, you're going to be passing and coming back late. Trevor Lawrence is going to have to throw the football. That snap percentage is going to go up for Etienne here and maybe creep across that 50% marker again for the week. So there is reason for optimism. I'm going to err on the side of skepticism here just because unless he makes a great play after the catch or gets a target in the end zone, the touchdown production seems a bit shaky and unreliable at this current point in time. So I'm going to sit Travis Etienne again, like I said, unless you're in a deeper PPR format with him in your flex lineup spot. But I do not have him in my top 24 for the running back position group for this week. Breece Hall, it's, he might as well build himself a house here on the must-sit list. He's been a 3-week appearance for the channel here. And like I said in the intro, it was kind of a fluky production point last week. We expected him, and the Jets were trailing double digits prior to the last 80 seconds of this game. They made a great comeback. But Breece Hall, as I said, Michael Carter is the back that's going to be on the field for this team for the majority of snaps over Breece Hall and in favor of him for as long as Joe Flacco is the quarterback here. When this team's digging themselves out of holes late, they're going to need to pass the rock in order to ultimately, try and have a chance of coming back. In Michael Carter's skill set, in terms of what he does as kind of a scat back, and I don't want to diminish him to being just a scat back, but that's more of where his skill set lies. Breece Hall's a phenomenal pass catcher out of the backfield. His touchdown this week was actually a reception, but that's just kind of how I expect things to trend here. And like I said, 7 rushes. He was very efficient, over 7 yards per carry with those touches, and then scored a reception touchdown. So that was nice. We were playing Cincinnati this week. Some people are actually predicting a Jets upset. I don't think that's going to be the case. They are 4.5-point underdogs this week. But if, the Bengals finally get things right and start just going max protect and throwing the ball downfield to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and things start working out, whatever the coaching adjustment is for the Bengals offensively, it's a severe talent mismatch here in favor of the Bengals, and you'd expect them to win this game. The game script to once again favor Michael Carter and Breece Hall to be an extremely touchdown-dependent flex play, if you want to go there. Darrell Henderson against the Arizona Cardinals this week. Rams favored by 3.5. Again, I reference these game scripts, especially for running backs, because it's very important to a team's ability to rush the football effectively. Henderson is someone that, while he was the more impressive back last week, I'm really questioning the deployment of Sean McVay here and how they're going to incorporate these backs each week. Darrell Henderson saw in week 1 an 82% snap share of this offense in favor of 18% for Cam Akers. We saw that bounce back last week to a 56% snap share for Henderson, still a clear favorite over Akers at 44%. But what's odd is that you saw in less snap share and a lesser, amount of playing time, Cam Akers touched the ball 17 times, and in a greater amount of play time, Darrell Henderson touches the ball 10 times. So it's kind of like last week, Ramondre Stevenson has 62% of the snap share, yet Damian Harris gets all the touches and the valuable work at a 40% snap share. It's flipped, though. So the guy getting less opportunity is the guy touching the ball more. And in this case, Henderson was able to make more of the opportunity. So you've got Darrell Henderson, Hendy as I like to call him here, at 4.7 yards per carry as opposed to 2.93 yards per carry for Cam Akers. Below 3 yards per carry is pretty rough, but it shows some confidence in him from the Rams coaching staff at the very least. If they're willing to give him that many more opportunities per game, you have to assume that that's for a reason here. Now, they were winning big, 28-3 in the third quarter. It was looking pretty rough for Falcons fans, and then you get a backdoor cover here at the Rams minus 10 points. They were 10-point favorites, essentially, is what that means for those of you that aren't sports bettors. And then the Falcons come roaring back and make a game of things. But for me, I just don't trust this backfield as a whole right now. I think Darrell Henderson's the more reliable talent and a guy who has a really complete skill set, but Cam Akers is making his way back into being an incorporated function for this football team. Chase Edmonds here, my 4th must-sit player against the Buffalo Bills this week. Miami is 5.5-point underdogs in that matchup. I don't really care about that in terms of game script because personally, I think that for a pass-catching running back like Chase Edmonds, that favors him, but he's kind of fallen out of favor with me in terms of having him in a starting role here. This is a player that actually was surpassed by Raheem Mostert this past week. He had a 51% snap share as opposed to Raheem Mostert's 55%. Mostert ended up touching the rock more as well, 14 touches for Mostert to 6 for Edmonds. It's looking like disappointment for those of us that drafted Chase Edmonds here this year. I had quite a few shares of him in terms of just being when he was going around the 10th, 11th round of the draft, I really liked him there. But then you started to see him creep up into like the 6th round, the 7th round, the 8th round, and then I was like, that's enough for me. So glad I stopped drafting him at that current point in time. Besides the point, though, this week against Buffalo, after seeing what these pass catchers did in Miami last week, it's going to be a shootout. It's going to be Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen versus Tua and what those guys can do here. And for Tua, he had success, chucking the ball downfield last week. He's going to want to continue to do more of that. We haven't seen him depending on, the check down game as much as I anticipated, and that hasn't been a big of a factor in his outlook as I expected. So Chase Edmonds, maybe he gets out in space and rumbles for a big run after catch here. Maybe he gets more targets than I'm giving him credit for. But after seeing that snap share diminish this past week in a very negative game script. They outscored the Ravens 28-3 in the fourth quarter. That's something that is just a little bit on my radar, something to be a bit worried about here. And then finally, Devin Singletary taking on the Miami Dolphins on the other side of the matchup. Again, they are 5.5-point favorites. Singletary is just someone that at this point is not a starting level caliber player. He's talented. He's made plays when given opportunities. And, I'm not going to smash on him for having a bad game on Monday Night Football because they just, totally toppled the Tennessee Titans so bad that they ended up bringing in James Cook in garbage time to have the ball in his hands 11 times for 53 yards and averaging 4.82 yards per carry on a 26% snap share. But Zach Moss had 19% of that snap share. Singletary was the lead back for that team at 54%, but he just doesn't get enough opportunities and enough valuable ones at that. He's not the guy that's soaking up all of these pass-catching potential plays that we expected him to in terms of, I had him as a bust candidate in draft season for this year, but I'm saying in terms of like back in, 2019 when he came out and was drafted by this team, that was kind of our hope for him here. That's long gone. He's not doing that stuff at a high level. Just 21 yards rushing on 8 touches and only 10 opportunities this week. He's not a red zone factor. And again, the rushing attack is honestly most valuable to the Bills when Josh Allen's carrying the rock. So something I'm staying away from here again this week. The running back position group is tending to, like I said, kind of deteriorate here as we progress through the season. We're seeing situations really evolve and stuff start to happen, which is exciting, but the disastrous yearly running back issues have started to arise. So these are names I'm staying away from this week. If you have to start one, I understand, but let me know your situations and scenarios down in the comment section below, why you are or aren't starting these players this week. And of course, check out some of the other episodes we've got up on the channel. Links in the description of today's video takes you to all of our platforms here at SFS. We've got a ton of stuff to consume and access for this season. So check it all out. I'll see you there. Peace out.